Welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Brandon, and today we're looking at Dengeki Bunko. 51 different titles make up the set, which makes it different than most sets, where you can play multiple anime titles in a single grouping together, as opposed to having to play individual titles. Like Fujimi, it has different titles that would be carried over into other sets as well. So there are other cards you can play with other titles. For example, you can play the Shauna Top End in the Shauna package. So you can play that both in Dengeki Bunko or in Shauna. However, that's really about all from Dengeki Bunko that we're probably going to see outside of the set itself. While that reaches into a lot of other titles that currently exist already in English, the only notable profiles that really stand out is this level 3 finisher that allows you to have essentially a real finisher now for the Shauna Top End. We've seen this kind of combo before with the Ichika and Quince. This requires experience 6 to be able to ditch 2 cards to burn 4, and if that damage is canceled, you can shuffle back a number of characters back into their opponent's deck equal to the number of characters on your field. So you can shuffle back up to 5 cards if damage is canceled with the burn 4, ideally in hopes to make the next burn 4 stick. When we look at Dengeki Bunko itself, a card we're most likely going to see in just about every build is probably going to be this 2-1. In part obviously because this 2-1, aside from its climax combo, which allows it to bring another copy of this and spawn it on stage, has the ability that whenever a climax is placed, it gains the ability to, along with the card's ability, because whenever a climax is in play, whenever this card reverses something, you reveal the top card of the deck. If it's level 1 or higher, you can add that to hand. So that can be played in standby, it can play with bar, it can play with pants itself, it can play with salvage. It doesn't matter as long as there's a climax in play. And so we'll likely see this one go pretty far because it's basically sitting at 10k for free, as long as all the other characters have Dengeki Bunko traits. Inside of Dengeki Bunko itself makes complete sense. So, decent power line, able to get reverses pretty efficiently, combos with any kind of climax, exactly what you want to see. So you might see that pretty consistently throughout. It also has an enabler that allows you to be able to get that onto field at 1. So you can potentially spawn in a copy from hand to then play climax and spawn in an additional copy. So now all of a sudden you have 2 of these at level 1. That's a pretty massive board. Yeah, exactly what you're looking for here. With that in mind, there's a lot of different possibilities in which way you can build Dengeki Bunko. I'm still very much in the testing phase of this series, in part just because right now I'm on tournament grind mode, but currently this is kind of what the deck looks like. We're kind of looking that kind of pants into the Salvage Top End, to be able to spawn this out at 1, to be able to play the CX to keep just spawning more copies out is perfectly fine. Trying to get those pieces into hand that way. I do also run the early play that allows you to be able, when it's placed on stage, as long as you have 4 more, it's minus the level, so you can bring it down at 2. 1,000 power for each of your opponent's backstage characters, so likely going to be at 10-5. On placement, you can ditch a card to salvage a card to hand from your clock, as long as you have 2 or more other characters. Because you have the 4 more condition, you're very likely meeting this condition anyway. So it's a healer that doesn't heal to stock, but heals to hand. So effectively, clock swapping is really all you're doing, except that you're not replacing the clock that you take, so that's a very convenient thing as well. So that's really my level 3s. Level 2s, I run the back row assist that just power pumps up my level 2 game. It also gives the ability of accelerate to pay 2 and clock yourself to give a character additional power and on reverse burn 1, tying that in with my endgame finisher that doesn't require any kind of stock. I think is really nice to be able to just essentially use additional stock to try to get additional burns in at the end. I also run this 2-1 that allows us to be able to give 2k power to everything else during my turn only. So it makes essentially a beat stick at that point. It makes the 2-1s with combo sit at 13 on attack, which I think is a pretty relevant number currently. I run 1 copy of the Anti-Change Bomb that sends to memory. It also has a secondary ability that allows me to stock the top card of my deck after both players milling 1. Not super relevant, but at the same time, the potential for this to be free, effectively, with that potential blind stock there, is at least worthwhile. I also run the stock swap. Just standard profile that we're going to need. It does exist in the deck. I run just enough yellow to make that happen for the situations where it's needed. Enabler for the 2-1. That's important. There's also the piece that allows you to be able to choose 2 of the 2-1s from waiting room and put them on the bottom of your deck in any order, essentially allowing me to guarantee that I'm going to be able to put a 2-1 out from spawning it out, so I can make sure that that's guaranteed at any point in the game. It's also guaranteed soul trigger, putting it into the bottom of the deck. That could be relevant as well. And also, you're making sure you have a level 2 or higher card. So that all of the effects that check the top card of the deck to make sure it's level 1 or higher can find that at the bottom of deck as well. So it's very much an enabler piece as well, just for a different case use there. I only run this a 1 of because there's only a handful of cases where I actually do want that, but I have tools to get that at 0 as well. Currently, I run an off level 1 as well. Basically, it's twin drive, but gains power for each character here, so it actually can get up to be a pretty sizable beat stick at 1. Beat stick at 1 with twin drive, I think, is actually pretty nice. They'll pay out some stock during turn as well. Going down to 0, the Rico, that also can on attack pump power. Really good to be able to help fix for some of my low count of 0 1-ofs. I run the helmet that is 3/5 can't side, just to make sure I have waiting room access guaranteed. I run the Ricky, where I clock myself from the waiting room to put at bottom of the clock to go search for a level 1 or lower character. Specifically, you're probably looking for this. Can on-demand search to be able to make this happen. So it's going to fulfill the role it needs. 2 copies of the anti-change counter. Climax swap, that it's a 3/5 on play. Run a Fuka, as well as on attack, reveal the top card of the deck if it's level 1 or higher. I can just choose a 0 in center stage and remove it. Can turn off some things at 0 from some different kinds of decks, which is really nice. Just randomly shut them off. Help deny on reverse effects, help deny just random pieces as well with this card. Just happenstance for also being the Fuka. Brainstormer. When Climax is placed, you can look at the top 2 cards and return them in any order. So top check, rearrange every time you slam a Climax, which helps enable our on reverse reveal. We're helping to basically guarantee that we're going to get some pluses off of these things. So just basically help set up enabler for that kind of thing from the back row. I do run the Accelerate Clean Cut. I actually really like this profile, and it also has a decent power line at 2/5. It steps over a lot of the utilitarian pieces that sit at 2 or 1/5, but also can just randomly clean cut as well. I think is a really cool ability here, alongside the 3K, as long as there's 5 more cards in hand, that can twin drive and then pay the stock after the fact. So it's kind of very much like a rush, like a soul rush kind of card, mill through the deck a little bit quicker kind of card, because it's always going to happen regardless, and just going to pay after the fact. So it's forced twin drive with this card, which I think is interesting. And I found it's been about the right speed to kind of pull this off. With the clean cut, this puts us to 1 a bit faster, which then we can put into the 2-1s on stage a little bit faster. So if we have the 2-1s on stage when I'm going into 1, they all of a sudden have a very hard time dealing with the board. So it's just worthwhile to mention as well that that's a play that can happen there, is you can kind of almost race to 1 and then sit big for a minute against your opponent, make them spend some resources they didn't want to spend. But that's this deck. Pants into the Salvage top end. This is kind of where I'm experimenting it with right now. There may be some changes that still come yet. Realistically, that zero lineup's probably going to get cleaned up quite a bit, and some of the tech pieces may change, but I think the core of the deck is pretty solid. With that in mind, that's kind of been this deck. Feel free to experiment with this set. There's a lot of different possibilities, a lot of different profiles, a lot of different things you can do. So with that kind of idea in mind, be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube thing, and until next time, have a good one.